Okay, Vino Madunino, Hino Alino, Maasea Denu Cornina, Neno Maasea Denu Cornino. I'd like to thank the Zavarov family for graciously inviting me to their house to do Shiur Torah. As last night we saw each other in a wedding, and already Baruch Hashem in this wonderful neighbor had 2 or 3 people asking me about giving a shiur, but Mike was the first. Lo Mishpata Bechorah. He was the first one that got me, and we committed it. And then afterwards, everybody else, you snooze, you lose. That's how it works. Okay, so I want to discuss a little bit because I haven't been here in a couple of weeks. So I'm going to do an overview of a couple of the parashot that we just read, and see if we can come to a common theme. The Talmud teaches us, our rabbis teach us, that just like there are as many faces there are in people, that's how many opinions there are. Everybody has opinions, yes? And sometimes opinions are correct, and sometimes opinions are incorrect. But many times they're both, neither of them are 100% correct. So we have to find what's called the middle ground. That's compromise. I mean, what I just told you is the success in marriage, right? Everybody has an opinion. If everybody tries to do their opinion all the time, it doesn't work out so well, okay? So the success is about compromising and finding a middle ground. But that's in a situation where you have 2 opinions that are valid opinions. Not always are there 2 opinions that are valid opinions. So first I want to discuss a little bit about the order of the parashiot in Sefer Bamidbar. Last week's parasha we read, of course, was Parashat Korach, and the one before that was Parashat Shalach. But according to Rashi specifically, the parashot are not in order. According to Rashi, and I'm going to prove it to you shortly, the incident of Korach happened before the incident of the spies. And let me prove it to you. Because it says in Sefer Dvarim, in the beginning, Moshe Rabbeinu is going to give a speech to all the Jewish people for the last 2 months of his life. That is Sefer Dvarim. And it says, Ele ha-devarim asher diber Moshe al kol Yisrael be'ever ha-yarden, bamidbar ba'arafa, mol suf ben parar ben tofel, ve'lavam ha'serot v'dizahav. These are the words that Moshe spoke to all the children of Israel on the other side of the Jordan River. In the wilderness over against Suf, Ben Paran, and Tofel, and Lavan, Chatzerot, V'Zahav. And these are all basically, if you look, these are all different places where the Jewish people tested Hashem. All places where there were failures of the Jewish people. And again, our Torah is very, very unique. Why is our Torah unique? Because since it's describing the human condition, the Torah is a book that is written not for angels, but it's a book written for men and women. It's very important for the Torah not just to point out the high points, but to also point out the low points. That just like we can learn how we aspire to be as great as Moses and as great as Joshua, in the same token, we have to learn to avoid being like Korach and avoid being like the spies. And even though it's a little bit embarrassing when we talk about our failures, this is what Moshe Rabbeinu was doing here. He's discussing the failures of Klal Yisrael in the Midbar. And over there it says, what did it say over there? What is vachatzerot? What is this chatzerot? What is this concept of chatzerot? We said, this Rashi says is machloket of Korach. The machloket of Korach happened in a place called Chatzerot. And where did Chatzerot happen? So if you look in Sefer Bamidbar in chapter 33, verse number 17, it says, Vayis'u mikivrot hata'ava vayahanu b'chaserot. They left a place called Kivrot hata'ava, which we'll talk about shortly, and they came to a place called Chatzerot. So one mistake happened in Kivrot hata'ava, and one mistake happened in Chatzerot. Then it says, Vayis'u mechatzerot, they left Chatzerot, Vayahanu beritma. They came to a place called Ritma. And what does Rashi say? What is Ritma? Al Shem Lashon Hara Shel Meraglim. That based on the evil tongue, the bad speech that the Meraglim had against, we'll see 1 second what was against, okay? What's Ritma? Shne'emar, Rashi brings from Tehillim. What does it say in Tehillim in chapter 120? Ma yiten lecha, ma yosif lach lashon remiyah, hitzeh gibor shenunim Im gachale ritamim. Translated, what shall be given unto thee, and what shall be done more unto thee, thou deceitful tongue? Sharp arrows of the mighty with coals of juniper. So we see ritma is the name of a tree called a juniper. And what was the place called? Ritma. So Rashi is saying that this place is a remez to where they made a mistake with their mouth. And where was that place? That was the place of the Meraglim. So we understand that the order is Kivrot HaTa'ava, then we have Korach, according to Rashi, and then we have the Meraglim. And the Meraglim was really the last thing that happened before this week's parasha, Parashat Chukat, which the beginning of the parasha discusses the Para Aduma, which is how one purifies himself from coming into contact with a dead body. And then we have a jump. Even though it doesn't look like there's a jump of about 37 years in this week's parasha, Parashat Chukat. The first section was given early. And then with the death of Miriam, when it discussed the death of Miriam, what did Miriam die? Miriam died 7 or 8 months before they went into the land of Israel. So we see there's 37 and a half years that is missing in the Torah. What happened during those 37 years? Well, for 19 of those 37 years, they stayed in Ritma, which means this place where they did the sin of the Meraglim. For 19 years, they did not move anywhere. Why is that? What was the message Hashem was sending to them? How do they decide to go from place to place? Yes? When? When the cloud moved. When the cloud moved, then they knew it was time to get the camp together and to go where. And how do they know when to stop? When the cloud stopped. You guys are learning well. Chazak, very good. So what does it mean for 19 years the cloud didn't move? It's almost like Hashem was telling them, I'm not paying attention to you right now. I'm going to ignore you. Because the sin of the spies was so grievous and so terrible, for 19 years they didn't move. And then for the next, say, 18 years, what'd they do? They went around in a big circle, sort of like when a plane is coming to an airport and there's an issue at the airport where they can't land. What do? You make big circles at 500 miles an hour, right? Around the airport, all circles, yes? So that's what they did. They circled around. And then when it was time to move again, they came back to the place called Kadesh, which is where the Meraglim was sent out from, and then they continued on their journey. So meaning what? The message was very clear. This whole delay that happened, the 19 years staying in one place, and then the 18 years going in a big circle was why? Because of the sin of the Meraglim. And only in the last year, when the people stopped dying, the ones who were 20 years old and up, that's when the cloud started to move and they moved forward again towards the land of Israel. Okay? Any questions on that so far? So order of the parashiot is basically Kivrot HaTa'ava, then you have Korach, and then you have Meraglim. Even though in the Torah, it's not that order. Now, why is that? Why is the Torah out of order? The Torah was given for what reason?
Not as a history book.
Not as a history book. That is correct. So if you open up a book on American history, it's not going to talk about the War of 1812 before it talks about the War of Independence in 1776. No history book does that because it's there to tell history. And in history, it's important to know the sequence of events. While the Torah is generally faithful to the sequence of events, there are certain theological reasons that it's going to go out of order. And here's an example. The most classic example where this happens very frequently is in the prophets. Take Yishaya, any one of the prophets. Those books are not in chronological order at all. The first prophecy of Yeshaya was the 6th chapter of the Sefer. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot Melech Haaretz Kevodo. That's the first prophecy of Yeshaya. What's the first chapter of Sefer Yeshaya? Parashat Chazon. Why is Parashat Chazon first? Chazon is one of the most difficult chapters to read in the entire Tanakh. When do we read Parashat Chazon? When do we read Haftarah Chazon? Right before Tisha B'Av. Yes? What is that? What's there? So why is that the first chapter of Yeshaya? And if you think about Yeshaya, the majority of the book of Yeshaya is discussing consolation. After Tisha B'Av, we have 7 Shabbat where we read Haftarot of consolation, right? There's 3 Haftarot that we read from Yud Zayin B'Tammuz until Tisha B'Av. Those are 3 Haftarot of punishment, of Puranut. And then the next 7 are Nechama, consolation. And what book in the Tanakh do all 7 of those consolation prophecies come from? Yeshaya. So Yeshaya, the majority of Yeshaya is a book of consolation, but the first chapter and some other ones in the middle is not. And why is the first chapter not? Why is the first chapter? Why is it not in order? Because that's the prophecy that Yeshaya said over and over and over again. Every time there was a new king that was appointed, that was given dominion over Am Yisrael, Yeshaya came knocking on the door and said, Chazon Yeshaya ben Amos. Basically say, if you don't fix your stuff, the temple's going to be destroyed. You can still fix it, but you got to fix it. And he did that to 4 kings in a row. The 5th king, his name was Menashe. And since Menashe didn't want to hear what Yeshaya had to say, what did he do? He killed him. And that was the end of Yeshaya's life. So Yeshaya, the first chapter of Yeshaya, is not the first prophecy he received, but it's the prophecy that he said over and over again in his life. So when the Torah wants to go out, sometimes out of order, it's going to do that for a theological reason. Okay, then now let's go to the earlier and then. So we have Parashat Beha'alotecha. Everything is really nice in Parashat Bemidbar. It's the Degalim, the camps. Then you have Naso. Hashem is counting the Jewish people because he loves them. How many times he counted them? Yes. Bemidbar starts off counting them. Yes. And then you get to Parashat Beha'alotecha. You have Birkat Kohanim. You have all kinds of beautiful stuff. And then you get to the middle of the parasha, or not to the middle, but maybe more towards the end. And you have 2 Pesukim that are not in the right place. These 2 Pesukim are very familiar to us. Vahi bin So'aron vayome Moshe. And then the next one, Shuva Adonai Revot Hafal Yisrael. These 2 Pesukim are not in the proper order. And why are they not in the Nuchoyomar? Why are they not in the proper order? Where do those 2 Pesukim belong? They belong in Parashat Bemidbar when it's talking about the encampment. It's talking about the flags and how they would go. Why these 2 Pesukim put here? So Rashi says, based on what it says in the Gemara, to make a differentiation between one episode of misbehavior from the Jewish people and another episode of misbehavior from the Jewish people. And if you think about from this point on, everything is all downhill. Everything so far has been good. We had Chet Egel, that was a problem. But so far we built the Mishkan. Yes, we finished the Mishkan. We read all of Sefer Vayikra. I talked about all the wonderful sacrifices that we would make and what we need to make. And then we get to Bemidbar, we get into Parashat Beha'alotecha, and now we have the beginning of trouble. So what's the beginning of trouble? So the end part, which is right after the Uvnucho Yomah, what does it say? Vayhi ha'am kemit'onanim ra be'ozne Hashem. The people started to complain. What did they complain? They complained about the man. Yes, so this is clear that this was a bad thing that they did. Yes? But what was the thing they did before that was bad? Because we say these 2 Pesukim were put in, why make a separation between one misbehavior and another misbehavior. What was the misbehavior earlier? The Pasuk says, Vayis'u mehar Hashem derech shloshet yamim, va'aron brit Adonai noseh lifnehem derech shloshet yamim latur lahem menucha. I'm in chapter 10, verse number 33. And they departed from the mountain of the Lord 3 days' journey, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them in 3 days' journey to search out a resting place for them. If you look at that pasuk, it doesn't seem like there's anything wrong that they did. But there is. What would they do wrong? It says, Vayis'u mehar Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. What is Har Yud-Kei Vav-Kei? The mountain of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. No. Har Sinai has 3 names. Sinai. What other names does it have? Come on, boys. What are the 3 names of Sinai? I gave you 1 name. Give me the other 2. No, that's not Sinai. Har Moriah is in Jerusalem. What are the other 2 names of Har Sinai? I did. Har HaElohim, and it's called Har Chorev. It's called Chorev. Those are 3 names. Har Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the mountain of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, Sinai is never called the mountain of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. There's only 1 mountain in the entire Tanakh that's called the mountain of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, and that is Har Moriah. So what does it mean they left the mountain of God? It doesn't mean they left Har Sinai. They left God. What happened? For 7 months, they were building the Mishkan, and they were learning Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching them the law. Now the cloud starts to go up, and they realize it's time to travel. What happens? When you're traveling, it's hard to learn. If you go on a plane, it's hard to learn. Yes, when you're sitting in the Bet Midrash, it's much easier to study Torah than it is when a person is traveling. So they were happy to be traveling, but not because they were going to the land of Israel. The part of the happiness of the traveling was they don't have to learn anymore. The Tosafot say, Ketinok haboreach mibet hasefer. Like a child at the end of the semester, at the end of the year, that is happy to leave school. Come on, we know that's the truth. Like I used to love May and June. You knew school was over, then you count the days of the summer, yes? Okay, but your kids, it's different. That's understand. Adults are not supposed to be that way, okay? And because they did this, this was the beginning of all the trouble that we have in the Midbar. This idea that they were leaving learning. And once a Jew is separating themselves from learning Torah, it opens the Pandora's box to descend and to fall and to fall and fall again. Okay. So what's Kivrot HaTa'ava? What does that mean? Kivrot HaTa'ava. Translate that for me. Does anybody have to translate that?
The tombs of
the tombs of desire. Very good. What was the desire?
To eat meat all of a sudden.
Actually, it's interesting. The man, what is it that they didn't like about the man?
It didn't have certain flavors.
Okay, but it had lots of different flavors. I mean, for heaven's sake, we're having chicken now. Chicken is not real Parmesan, not eggplant Parmesan. The man had a quality. First of all, there was no waste. It was almost perfect human food. It was food without any waste. Nothing was wasted, which means they didn't have to go to the bathroom. But the man also took away ta'ava, took away desire. Not desire for having children, but desire for things like power and money.
Really?
Yes.
So it was just like food and bodily pleasures.
Well, that's all bodily pleasures.
Desire?
Oh, yeah.
Power?
Sure. Isn't that a bodily pleasure?
I thought it was more of a mind trip.
Okay. I think it was all types of desires.
Why do they have desire for money if they left Mitzrayim with money to last them?
Now, that is a great question. I want you to ask that question again, because that's a great question. And unfortunately, the answer is why. So your question is, why would a person who has money have a desire for more money? Okay, now I'll give you the answer to that. You ever hear of a guy named Elon Musk? Okay? Elon Musk, does he go to work every single day? He's not doing it for money? No? And Bill Gates is not doing it for money? And Steve Jobs is not doing it for money, and the head of Google is not doing it. So the real, I think he's also, come on, human nature, harotze kesef lo isba kesef. A person who has desire, will for money, will never be satisfied with money. You have $1 million, you want 2 million. You have 2 million, you want 10 million. You have 10 million, you want 50 million. It's like a game. Yes, it's a game. Like Trump, he wrote a book called The Art of the Deal. It's the deal. It's the actual, the conquest. That is a Yetzer Hara. That is an inside. That's something that has to be controlled. And because they didn't control it, the man took away that desire for all these negative things. In fact, what was the first sin of man? What was the problem with the Yetzer Hara? What word is used in that pasuk? And she saw that the tree was ta'ava la'enayim, desirous for the eyes. So with the whole beginning, the downfall of man from the beginning was about desire, the concept of ta'ava. And the man took that away. And that's why it's called kivrota ta'ava, because they wanted to have the ta'ava. So what happened? Hashem gave them the slav. Once they got the slav, and they weren't eating man at that point, what happened? Boom, the ta'ava comes inside. And that's why it says, Habasar odenu ben shinehem, and they're dying as they're eating it. Because why? Because when a person has desire and doesn't control the desire, it generally leads a person to an early end. And if it's not an early end, it's not a good end. Because when a person leaves the world, what do you take? You don't take any money with you. Yes? So that place is called Kivrot HaTa'ava, the burial or the tombs of desire. What happens after that? They go to Chatzerot. What happens in Chatzerot? Miriam speaks against her brother. Yes? But also what happens in Chatzerot, based on the Rashi we learned, is what? Korach. Korach speaks against his uncle Aaron and his uncle Moses. Cousin. Uncle? Cousin. Okay, very good. Now, what was the problem of Korach? Let's get to that. I'm going in order. Chronological order, not the order of the Torah. What happens, Korah? What was the problem with Korach? Yeah, okay, well, he wasn't an angel. And generally, a person who's not an angel doesn't get lucky enough to marry an angel. Okay, you get what you look for. Okay, generally, right? Ta'ava. He was jealous. He wanted glory. He wanted kavod. He wanted honor. That's a ta'ava.
Didn't he feel like he was owed that because of his lineage?
You could feel like you're owed whatever you want, but when you have somebody by the name of Moses who's basically being told by God exactly what's supposed to happen, right? What Korach was questioning is whether Moses was appointing these people based on God or his own opinion. If he knew for sure that God had said it, then he wouldn't have said anything against Moses. Did Korach ever complain before? Why did he think Moses was not talking to God? at that particular. They appointed Elitzaphan ben Uziel to be the president of Shevet Levi, and he felt that he was the next one in line. And the truth is, he was the next one in line. Why did Korach think Moshe Rabbeinu didn't speak to God about that? No, that's after. He goes to rebel like that. But the whole idea, where it came from his wife, of course, but she recognized something. Korach couldn't believe that it's possible that God would skip over him. Why? Because he was arrogant. The real answer is, why did God skip over him? Because he was arrogant. Okay? And Parashah Miriam, what do we learn from the Parashah of Miriam? What does that teach us? Now we're going in chronological order. Chatzerot is where that problem happened with Miriam, and that's what Korach happens, yes? What do we learn from the episode of Miriam? She spoke against her brother, that's correct. But why did God basically tell all three of them to come to him, Moshe, Aharon, and Miriam? And then they all came to him, and then he sent Moshe Rabbeinu away and just talked to Aharon and Miriam. Why is that? Moshe would have felt that left out. No, Moshe was invited to come, and then God said, you go over there, I want to talk to them privately. Who shouldn't be embarrassed? Okay, that's a nice answer. That's one. What's another reason? What did God tell Miriam and Aharon? What was their mistake? What was her mistake and his mistake for listening? What's their mistake? What did they think?
They were on the same level.
They thought they were on the same level. Meaning what? Miriam is a prophetess. Aharon is a prophet. Moshe is a prophet. Miriam and Aharon did not have to separate from their spouses. Why not? Because God would only speak to them when God wanted to speak with them. And even if they prepared themselves to receive prophecy, it doesn't mean they receive prophecy. And that, by the way, is for all of the other prophets, every one of them, they only received prophecy when Hashem wanted to talk to them. If they wanted to talk to Hashem, and Hashem didn't want to talk to them, Hashem didn't talk to them. There's one exception. Moshe Rabbeinu. There's no one else that says, hold on one second, let me talk to God. No other prophet says that. Moshe Rabbeinu knew that every time he wanted to talk to God, God was available to talk to him. With no cloud and no mask. Moshe's prophecy was unique. How come Miriam and Aharon didn't know about it? How come Miriam and Moshe didn't know that Moshe's prophet was unique? How would they know? Moshe would have had to tell them. And Moshe didn't tell them. Why not? Anav mikol ha'adam asher al penei ha'adama. Because Moshe was the most humble man that ever lived. This is why Hashem had such a close relationship with Moshe more than anybody else. It's because everybody else had a little bit more ga'ava. Moshe Rabbeinu was Anav mikol ha'adam, the lowest, the most humble of ever. And that's the reason why he had this close relationship with Hashem. So he didn't tell his brother and sister, who are his confidants, his older siblings. By the way, and I can talk to God at any time. He didn't. Why? Because that's bragging. And why did Hashem send Moshe Rabbeinu away? Because he's about to tell Miriam and Aharon the point that they missed. What point did they miss? Moses doesn't tell you how great he is, but I'm going to tell you how great he is. And you do not tell the greatness of a person to their face, because then it gives them arrogance. So we tell only 5% of the shevach in front of the person and 95% behind. So he sent Moses away because God was going to tell Moses and Aaron, here's the thing that you guys don't get. Anav mikol ha'adam pe'al pe'adaber, I speak to him face to face. Your prophecy is nothing like his prophecy. And why did you have the chutzpah to speak be'avdi be'Moshe? First, you spoke against my servant, and then you spoke against Moshe.
Which is the same person.
But how is God addressing? Vayamot Moshe Eved Hashem. No one else, Yehoshua is called Eved Hashem, but no one else in the entire Torah is called Eved Hashem. Moshe is called Eved Hashem, and Yehoshua is called Eved Hashem. No one else. Thank you so much. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nivaro. As a matter of fact, all of Klal Yisrael are called Avdi. This is in Yeshaya in multiple places that all the Jewish people are called my servant. Avdi, Yaakov, Avdi. But that's not in the Torah, that's in the Tanakh. So what happened? So Miriam is punished, yes? And they had to wait for 7 days for her to be healed. And then right after that, what happens? The incident of Korach. And what was Korach's initial mistake? The parasha says, Vayikach Korach. What did he take? So there's many answers to what I'm saying. Rashi says, Lakach et atzmo latzad. He took himself to a side. What does that mean, he took himself to a side? I have an opinion. My opinion is that Moses appointed Elitzaphan based on his own idea, not that Hashem told him. But that's not what he fights about. He couches it, the Midrash says, with a talit that's full techelet. Ask Moshe Rabbeinu another question. What if you have a house full of Sifrei Torah? Does it require mezuzah? Which means he's couching it. And Korach's mistake was what? Korach said, we are all holy. Which means we're all on the same level. That's the same mistake that Miriam made on a much lower degree. Korach, now, is it true that all of Klal Yisrael are holy? Absolutely. But each person, there are different levels. And that was Korach's mistake. Korach's mistake was not recognizing that, and what allowed him to make that mistake? His arrogance. And why was he so arrogant? He had too much money and too much intelligence. Both of those are things that can be used for the good. Money and wisdom. But they can also be used for bad. And that's what we learn from Korach. Once a person is Vayikach Korach, the first word, once a person is taking, what does that mean? He's already not in the right space. I'll tell you what I mean. What is a baby is born. We have Baruch Hashem, we have a beautiful baby over here, hopefully sleeping now, yes? What do you notice about that baby's hands? Closed. Why is a baby's hands closed? I'm not asking for the embryological reason. Because the baby is only there to take. Ask any mother, and she will tell you he's hungry, he's thirsty, he's only there to take. If it wasn't for the fact that they were so cute, we would leave them outside. But because they're so cute and they're so adorable, right? That makes you want to do all. You would, a baby, that level of selfishness, you would never marry that. At least I hope you didn't. The goal as we get older is we got to realize that we have to open our hands, but not open our hands to receive, open our hands to give. Patoach tiftach et yadecha la'aniyecha. Open up your hands. You shall surely open up your hands to the poor, to others. One of the qualities of a Jew is gomle chasadim. What does that mean? Giving. If a Jew is missing that quality, you can question their lineage. Yes. The Gemara says 3 qualities. Baishanim, Rachmanim, Gomle Chasadim. Easily embarrassed, Rachmi, merciful, and Gomle Chasadim. Missing any one of those 3, you can investigate their lineage because they're probably not a descendant of Avraham Avinu. It's a very powerful statement. Now, Korah, of course, he was part of the Jewish nation. I'm not saying that. But once a person is looking vayikach, Korach, once you're looking to take, now you're already in a problematic place. Because then you're looking out for yourself. And then Hashem gives a warning. Because Moshe Rabbeinu does something uncharacteristic. What does he do that's uncharacteristic? When people make mistakes, what does Moshe Rabbeinu do? He prays to Hashem to forgive them. B'nai Yisrael make the sin by the golden calf. Hashem wants to wipe us all out. Please, Hashem, forgive them. By the Meraglim, please, Hashem, forgive them. Over here, tomorrow you will see. Did he? He doesn't pray for them. Doesn't say he prays for them. He tries to negotiate with them. He tries to talk to them. He goes to them instead of staying where he is. He goes to Datan and Aviram to try to say, no, came from Hashem. This is not me. It's from Hashem. But they would not listen. It doesn't say Vaydaber Hashem and Moshe Lemor. I mean, from the pshat of you can give a drasha and fine, but from the simple meaning of the Pesukim, Boker, Veyoda Adonai et asher lo. In the morning, you will see Hashem is going to say who is his. Hashem is going to say who is right. Why did he say Boker? Why didn't he say right now? Give them time to reconsider. And what they do at that time? They didn't reconsider. And Moshe Rabbeinu asked for something that happened, that they should die in a way that has never been seen before. Why so dramatic? Korach was attacking Moshe's prophecy. Without Moshe's prophecy, we have no Torah. I mean, we got 2 commandments directly from Hashem on Har Sinai. Other opinions said we've heard all the 10, okay? But how to do them, how to fulfill the Torah, how to live life as a Jew. Torah tziva lanu, Moshe. No Moshe, we got problems. Chas v'shalom. So Korach was really going at the essence of Judaism.
What's wrong with looking out for yourself?
It's not good. I know it's very anti-American because in America it's all about being number one. That is not the Torah. In the Torah, it's better to be number two or number three. One should not run for positions of leadership. If it's thrust upon you because there's no one else to do it, you don't give it up. But you run away from situations of leadership because it's dangerous. Who do we learn that from? Yosef. Yosef was the youngest of the brothers, and he died first. Nahaget atzmo barabanut, it says. He put himself in a leadership position. Now, that wasn't necessarily what he was looking for in the beginning, which means mentally, he was the leader in Egypt for all those years, yes? In the beginning, he was thrust into that situation. But then he guided himself into a position of leadership, which means when God made him the second in command in Egypt, did he want to consolidate all the power of Egypt in the hand of Pharaoh? Was that Hashem's goal? No. Yosef did that. And what was the result of that? What's that? Okay, but what was the result for Klal Yisrael because he did that? Before Yosef, Paro was a figurehead. He was like Biden. Someone else is running the show over there. We don't, he's just a puppet, right? There's someone pulling strings in the back, right? Before Yosef, Paro was a puppet leader. There were wealthy nobles that controlled everything, sort of like what you saw in a selection that happened in Iran this week, yes? Nobody runs unless the Ayatollah says it's okay? And he gives you choice between worse and worser, right? That's the choices they have, yes? So, but really, and even the president of Iran, who runs everything, whether it's domestic, whether it's foreign policy, it's all through the Ayatollah. So that's a figure leadership. That's not a real leader. There's someone behind the scenes. In Iran, we know exactly who's behind the scenes. In this country, we haven't figured it out yet.
When you say leadership, you mean any type of leadership or really political?
Political leadership. So what did Yosef do? When they were starving and he collected all the grain, he made them give up all their land. And then he made them sell them. The Egyptians sold themselves to slaves to Paro. What he did is he consolidated all the power of Egypt in the hands of Paro, which allowed the beginning of Shmot. That the king, he was now powerful. He doesn't need anybody else. Why did Achashverosh kill Vashti? Because he didn't need her anymore. Why did he need her in the beginning? Because she was related to Nebuchadnezzar, and he was not from royal blood. So he needed to legitimize his kingship by marrying Vashti. But once he had all these provinces and he had this big party and all that kind of stuff, and he showed his wealth, now he realizes he doesn't really need her anymore, which opened the door for Esther. So he said, Nahaget atzmo barabanut, he put himself into a place. You were supposed to be the number two. Those are the dreams. But that doesn't mean you consolidate all the wealth of Egypt in the hand of Paro. And that caused some of the problems. Because he made a mistake.
But if Achashverosh didn't need Vashti, why did he need Esther?
He didn't need Esther, but because he got rid of Vashti, he needed Esther. That opened the door. Okay. So now Moshe, and how did Moshe Rabbeinu test Korach and his people? With incense. Why did he use incense?
Like Torah, you mean?
Ketoret. They all should have remembered the incident that happened with the sons of Aaron. What happened to the sons of Aaron? They died. Why?
Tried to bring the
Because they brought Esh Zara, Ketoret, they brought in a proper way. Moshe Rabbeinu said, you're going to take machtot right away. They should have recognized, okay, this is not a good idea. And what did they do? They did it anyway. Anyway, what happens to these machtot after they die? They gathered them together. Why did they gather them together? Because even though they were mistaken, they became holy because these are Leviim. So their service was the attitude that was the problem. The service itself wasn't necessarily the problem. We have a korban called pigul. What's pigul? I bring a korban, but I think it's a different korban. The service appears to be nothing wrong with it, but because my mind is someplace else, that invalidates the service. Right? Their mind was in the wrong place, but even though the shovels that they used still retain the level of holiness. And then there's a warning. Zikaron livnei Yisrael, it says, that all the Jewish people should remember, Leman asher lo yikrav ish zar, so that no strange person, which means non-Kohen, should approach lo mizera Aaron, lehaktir k'torat lifnei Hashem. And in the situation in Nadav and Avihu, they were from Zera Aaron, and yet they died. Here, these are not from Zera Aaron. The message was, no k'torat except for the sons of Aaron. The lo yeh kekorach v'cha'adato. And you should not be like Korach and his entourage. Kasher diber Adonai b'yad Moshe. Now, what was the problem? Kekorach va'adato. What was the machloket? We said it was between Korach and Aaron, or Korach and Moshe, yes? But what does it say in Pirkei Avot? In Pirkei Avot, it lists the concept of a machloket l'shem shamayim and a machloket that's not l'shem shamayim. What's a machloket l'shem shamayim? Hillel and Shammai. What's a machloket lo l'shem shamayim? Korach va'adato. Now let's think about that. Hillel and Shammai disagree with each other. They had a machloket. Wait a minute. But the litigants or the disputants was Hillel and Shammai. The Mishnah then says, but what's a machloket lo l'shem shamayim? Korach va'adato. Why doesn't it say Korach the Moshe? Korach the Aharon. The disputants in this situation weren't Korach and Adato. The disputants was Korach and Moshe, Korach and Aaron. Why does the Mishnah word it? And that's what the Torah says. V'lo tieh kekorach v'cha'adato. From here you do understand that the machloket wasn't between Korach and Moshe or between Korach and Aharon. The machloket was between Korach and his entourage. Is that true? He convinced them, then it's not a machloket. Where's the machloket? So the Mishnah is giving us a yesod, and it's hinted to in the Torah here. How do you know if a machloket is l'shem shamayim or not? A machloket l'shem shamayim is looking to uncover the emet. Hillel wanted to uncover the emet, and he thought his way was the emet. Shammai wanted to uncover the emet, and he thought his way was the emet. When they discussed with each other, their goal was the same, to come up with the emet. That's called the machloket l'shem shamayim, because the goal is to reveal the truth. Moshe Rabbeinu also wanted to reveal the truth. Korach and Adato were not interested in revealing the truth. Meaning what? Let's say, for argument's sake, that Korach would have been correct. In terms of, let's say, God would have said, Moses, I'm reconsidering. We shouldn't have pointed El Tzafan. We should have pointed Korach. Does that end the machloket? Why not?
Because it says everything Moshe is doing. Because God never makes mistakes.
We're not catching a subtlety here. Korach was from Shevet Levi. Who joined him? Majority of the people who joined him were from Shevet Reuven. Why did Reuven join?
Because the firstborn.
Ooh. Meaning both of them had the goal to be serving in the Mishkan. But each of them had a different claim. They were mutually exclusive. So if Korach would have been right, next they fight with each other. Where do we see that? It's a Pele. We see something in the parasha. In this country, because Reuven is going to say, I want to be the leader. What? Once Aharon is not the leader, now Korach fights with Reuven to see who the leader is, which means the fight doesn't end because they're not interested in the truth. They're interested in what's good for them. If they were interested in the truth, that ends the machloket once it's resolved. Now, you have a phenomenon in this country that people can't understand. You have the left. The left, gay rights, LGBTQ, XYZ. And then you have the Muslims. And they're together. Who's the one demonstrating in the streets against Israel? It's not the Trumpers. It's not the right crazies. I mean, I'm not saying they like us either. The right crazies don't like us either. But they're not the ones jumping in the streets. It's the lefties and the Muslims. And now let's understand this. What do they have in common? If this becomes, God forbid, a Muslim Sharia country, the first people to hang from cranes are the LGBTQTXYZ. Right? So we understand from here that what? Let's look at China and Russia. They have a partnership. But that's a partnership only against the West. God forbid the West falls. What's the next fight? Against each other. Take the Muslims. You have Hezbollah. They are Shiite. You have Hamas that are Sunni. They're both fighting against Israel. God forbid, it never is going to happen, but God forbid they win. Then they fight with each other. That's how you know that their machloket is not l'shem shamayim. That's how you know it's based on a sheker. It's based on a lie. So what do the left and the Muslims, what's their common? They have to have a common ground. Otherwise, they won't be marching with each other. What's their common ground? They want to destroy Western civilization for different reasons. The left wants to destroy Western civilization because they're Marxists. They want the power to be in the hands of the few, the people to own nothing and be sheeple. The Muslims also want everybody to be sheeple, but the Sharia law and the Quran. So at the end, even if, God forbid, they win, they fight with each other. That's Korach va'adato. And that's how you know the machloket is not l'shem shamayim. They're not looking for the truth. They're looking for control. And that's exactly what the machloket of Korach was. Okay, now let's go to the Meraglim. That was another dispute, yes? That was another difference of opinion. What's the difference of opinion by the Meraglim? Moshe Rabbeinu, shalach lecha anashim. Yes? Why did he send them? We learned it from Devarim. To him and asked him to send spies into the land of Israel. How do we know Moshe Rabbeinu was a little concerned about it? Hashem said, shalach lecha anashim. Do it for yourself if you want. L'tovatcha. I'll leave it up to you. When Hashem leaves it up to you, that's you already have the answer. The answer is no. If Hashem didn't command it, what does that mean? Don't do it. Okay, but Moshe is a human being. He's not a god. We don't believe in a perfect man. Okay, so he made a mistake. Shlach lecha anashim. Rashi says, what does it mean, shlach lecha anashim? L'datcha. If you need that, go right ahead. You need it. I don't need it. You think it's a good idea? You go right ahead. See how it works out for you. Go ahead. Get Mitzrayim. What about Mitzrayim? Okay, and they're not ready. So now, okay, so we understand what was Moshe Rabbeinu's motivation for sending the spies in? Who's doing the fighting?
Hashem's army.
Hashem's doing the fighting, so it really doesn't make a difference. Moshe Rabbeinu was doing a test. What was his test? Am I going into the land of Israel? That was his test. Why did he think maybe he's not going into the land of Israel? Remember, the hitting of the rock doesn't happen until next week's parasha, which really it doesn't happen until 37 years later. Moshe Rabbeinu hits the rock within 7 months of going into the land of Israel. Yes? If you look in Devarim, Sefer Devarim, the first parasha, what is the first sin Moshe Rabbeinu focuses on in the book of Devarim? He doesn't focus on the sin of the calf. He focuses on the Meraglim. And what does he say? Gam bihi anaf Hashem. Also with me, Hashem was angry. Because when Hashem punished Klal Yisrael, he said everybody above the age of 20 years old and up is going to die in the desert. Zulati, with the exception of Caleb ben Yefuneh and Yoshua bin Nun. Who's not included in that? Moshe's not included in that. Or Aharon or Miriam. That doesn't mean they died because of the sin of the spies. They didn't have to dig a grave and go in there. But it means they're not going into the land of Israel. But I'm going to suggest you, and this is not my idea, this is one of the other Mepharshim say, Moshe Rabbeinu sent the spies in because he wanted to see if he was going into the land of Israel. Why did he think he wasn't going? What's that? That's not until after they came back. The parasha before last week, what does it say? Moshe Rabbeinu was frustrated because the people were complaining up the wazoo. And he said, I can't handle this. I can't do this myself. So what did Hashem say? Okay, give over from your ruach, and we're going to have 70 people that are going to be helping you. Helpers, 70 helpers, yes? What's the problem with the number 70? There's a problem with the number
You
70.
can divide it.
You can't divide it into 12. That means that 2 tribes are going to be missing people. So when Hashem sent 70, what happened? 2 people didn't come. Why didn't they come? What's that? Embarrass who? No, they volunteered. They chose not to jump into a position of leadership. They resisted it. Let them do it. We're going to stay behind. Gershon, the son of Moshe Rabbeinu, comes and says, those 2 guys that stayed behind, mitnabeim b'mahaneh, which means these 70 people were supposed to become prophets, and they did once, and that's it. Those 2 who stayed behind, Eldad and Medad, they became prophets anyway, and they remained prophets for the rest of their lives. Why? Because they didn't jump in the position of leadership. They stayed back. What was their prophecy? Gershon comes to Moshe and says, they're saying something, Moses. They're saying, you are going to die in the desert and Joshua is going to bring them in. Yoshua hears this. What does he do? Even though Yehoshua knows that if Moshe Rabbeinu dies, who's going to be the leader? He doesn't want it. He says, Adoni Moshe Kelaem. He doesn't like what they're saying. He wants Moses to be the leader. He doesn't want to be the leader.
Leader material.
That's leader material.
Don't we learn that once you have prophecy, it kind of primes you for being able to receive prophecy easier later?
But they stepped out. They didn't want it. They said, I'm not going to take that position of leadership.
No, the other one, the other.
The other 70, once they had prophecy once, shouldn't
No.
that open them up to prophecy?
No, Yonah had prophecy once and that's it. After that, God never spoke to him again. It's a one-time deal. Some prophets, Hashem spoke to them once and that's it. It's an amazing thing for God. I mean, I would love God to speak to me once. I'll take it. Right? But once you have, but anyway. What's that? Devorah was?
Yeah.
She only prophesied once?
No. Devorah was her whole life. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken. So Eldad and Medad become prophets forever until they died, right? And their prophecy was Moses is not going into the land of Israel. So Moses sends the spies in because he heard that, right? And that's a negative prophecy, right? What do we know about a negative prophecy? Doesn't have to happen. If the person can make teshuvah and respond appropriately, when you hear a negative prophecy, what is that supposed to do? To stimulate teshuvah. That's why Yonah didn't want to go to Nineveh. He didn't want them to make teshuvah. Right? When God said, I'm going to destroy Sodom to Abraham prayed for them. Why? Because God's telling me. Why is he telling me? He must want me. That was Moshe's mistake. He heard the prophecy of Eldad and Medad, and he wanted to see if he could fix it. So he sent the spies in. That was his desire to send the spies in. Shlach lecha, for your benefit, Moshe Rabbeinu. I don't need it, Hashem said. What was his mistake? What was his mistake?
Not trusting in Hashem.
No, it's trusting in Hashem. And it's logical that they should test out the land. It's all that logical stuff. How do we know Moshe Rabbeinu was concerned before he sent them? changed the name of Hoshea to Yoshua. Why did he do that? Ya Yoshiacha me'atzat meragilim. May Yud-K save you from the potential evil counsel of the spies. So we see Moshe Rabbeinu was concerned that this is a problem. Sometimes it's exactly the path that we're trying to avoid that makes us step into the problem that makes it happen. Eldad and Medad was saying Moshe Rabbeinu is not going in. Moshe Rabbeinu is not going in because of the spies. Okay? The hitting of the rock, that's later. We'll talk about that in a couple weeks. Now, why did the spies want to go? Because remember, what stimulated the spies thing? They all came to Moshe Rabbeinu, all Klal Yisrael in a big mix, and they said, send spies into the land. That's already a problem. Why is it a problem? Because they're coming what's called bi'irbubia. The old people, the young people pushing the old, no one giving proper respect. That should have been a signal to Moshe Rabbeinu that this is not a good idea. Maybe that was the signal. He tried to get an insurance policy. What was his insurance policy? He's going to pick one member from each of the tribes. He's going to pick the best of them. And that precisely was his mistake. Because out of the 12, 10 of them had a different agenda. What was their agenda? What I'm going to say now is not politically correct.
They didn't want to go into Israel.
Why didn't they want to go into Israel, these 10 guys?
They had it made in Midbar.
They knew, like if you ever watched The Godfather, right? There's a conciliary for war and there's a conciliary for peace, right? The right-hand man to The Godfather is different if it's a war versus it's peacetime, yes? The person you want as your number 2 in a war is different than the person you want in your number 2 for peace. It's not exactly the same brain, okay? So they recognized what? They recognize that once they go into the land of Israel, they're no longer going to be in charge because they are not leaders of a people that is in a place that has to struggle. They are leaders of a people when everything is fine. Now, who were these leaders, by the way? Who were these leaders? Some say it was the same 12 leaders that we had from whatchamacallit. Some opinions say they were the same 12. Who ended up being the leaders of Klal Yisrael in the Midbar? They just did a vote. They had like a debate. They had a debate and a vote. The ones who were beaten by the Egyptians when the Jewish people didn't meet their quota, because the Egyptians recognized if I beat the Jew that's working, he's not going to be able to work. And he'll take the beating. Instead, what am I going to do? I'm going to beat another Jew, and he's not going to want that person to get beaten because he's lazy. The Nazis did the same thing, by the way. So those were the ones who took the beatings for Klal Yisrael. So those people already received the beatings. Now they're in their leadership position. They don't want to go back to a place of taking the beatings. And that's why they gave the bad report, because they wanted to stay in the desert. Why didn't God just say, okay, stay in the desert? I mean, imagine that. They have Moses. They have the Mishkan. They have the Man. They have the Be'er of Mayim. They have the clouds. They have everything they need. But one thing they don't have: toil. Okay, they got to go out a little bit if they didn't behave themselves the day before to go get them on a little farther. That is tremendous emunah. No bank account, no insurance policy, no nothing. I collect today and hopefully tomorrow. We couldn't live like that.
You're up to you.
But they didn't want to toil. This is not the way of the Torah. This is not the way of God. When God made Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, the toil was light. But it's not like they snapped the fingers and the fruit just came to them in their hand. They had to go and pick it, which means there was some toil. That's why it says he put them in the garden, le'ovda u'shomra, which means work is a necessary part. Amelut. What's the word I'm looking for? Struggling. This is a part of life. Going into the land of Israel, what's the first thing that happens? The man stops. The be'er stops. The clouds stop. What do they got to do? They got to hunt. They got to eat their own food. Everything is now on their own. This is how Hashem wants it to be. He wants us to work within the world to bring holiness. Not to go on a mountain, seclude ourselves, pray 5 times a day, fast. No, this is not. Now, that doesn't mean there are some people that shouldn't be spending all that time in the spiritual world, but that is not the role of the majority. Certainly not until the Mashiach comes. And that's what's going on in the land of Israel right now. That's the machloket in the land of Israel right now. On one hand, people who understand that learning protects the soldiers. And that's correct. It does protect the soldiers. But on the other hand, the soldiers protect the learners. And there's a Talmud that's quoted in Masechet Sanhedrin that discusses Yoav and David. Yoav was David's general, and David. So the Gemara, the conclusion of the Gemara there is Yoav was successful in battle because David was learning Torah. And David was able to learn Torah because Yoav was successful in battle. So people want to learn from this Gemara. Aha! But the problem is that you look at the beginning, that's the end of the sugya. The beginning of the sugya, Yoav is being charged with murder. And he's defending himself, making halakhic arguments of why it was okay for him to kill Avner. And it goes through a whole bunch of arguments. Well, you could have done this. No, I couldn't have done this because of this. And you couldn't know because I couldn't have done this because of this. So what do you see from that? Yoav was not an ignoramus. Yoav was also a learned person. He may not have been a full-time learner. He was a warrior. But he was not an ignoramus. And now let's talk about David for 1 second. David was just a learner? Who killed Goliath? David. David was a warrior. So we understand, if you understand, there's an idea what? Yes, there needs to be people learning, and there needs to be people fighting. But the fighters have to be learning, and the learners have to be fighting. The separation is the problem. Now, we can have a compromise in the middle. We said there's 2 opinions, very strong opinions. Jews have opinions. The solution is, why should the learners not be trained how to defend? Should there be a problem locally when all the fighters are on the fronts? If somebody breaks through, God forbid, and they don't know how to fight, what have you accomplished? The bullet's not going to go through the Gemara. And we allow these soldiers to go out into the battle and allow them not to have any Torah education to understand what they're fighting for? They're fighting for liot am chofshi be'artzenu. It's a big mistake. They're not fighting liot am chofshi be'artzenu. They're fighting lashuv le'eretz avotenu. The original stanza of the Hatikvah was not what we have in today. If you look at how it was written in the late 1800s, okay, it didn't say liot am chofshi be'artzenu. That is not a Torah idea. A Jew is never free, except when he loses a first-degree relative and doesn't have to do any mitzvot that day. There's no such thing as a vacation from God. There's no such thing as freedom. That's precisely the mistake that they made 2 weeks ago. Zacharnu et hadaga asher nochal b'Mitzrayim hinam. We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt for free. Rashi says, they ate fish for free? The Egyptians didn't give them straw for the bricks to build their own buildings. And you mean to tell me they gave them fish for free? Nonsense. What does it mean we remember the fish we ate for free? Free from the Torah. And why fish? There's almost no halachot with fish. Scales, fins, whack it over the head, barbecue time. Even the halachot regarding fish, they wanted to have that for free. Forget about, shechting an animal and all the different halachot you have to go through with the shechita, basar halak, all this kind of stuff, yes? There's no such thing as liot am chofshi be'artzenu. That's nonsense. The original stanza is lashuv le'eretz avotenu. What's the difference? Liot am chofshi, me. I'm entitled to live for free because I'm a Jew and I've been persecuted and I was tortured everywhere I went by the Gentiles in the world, and we're entitled to have our own space in the world. That's not a Torah argument. That's a Gentile argument. The Torah argument is like this. Our fathers were promised this land because they walked with God in faith. The only zuchut we have to be there is because of them. If not for them, I don't deserve anything. I have nothing coming to me. Why'd we suffer? Because we deserved it, because we didn't behave ourselves. Okay, they overdid it. They'll get their punishment for overdoing it. But liot av chofshi be'artzenu, that's not the answer. And that's the mistake.
Why was it changed?
Because it didn't fit with the original founders of the state of Israel. They didn't want to go back to the land of their fathers. They wanted to get rid of the Torah, which is exactly what Paul, Yamach Shemo, did. He created a religion called Christianity. How? By saying the Torah no longer counts. You don't have to do it. I have a new idea. A Jew hears new idea, we run in the other direction. We don't need any new ideas. We're very, very happy with the ideas we received through our national revelation. We don't need anybody yo-yo on the way to Damascus, hearing Jesus talking, there isn't Jesus, he thinks he's talking to him. We don't need some lunatic in a cave in Saudi Arabia who thinks he's talking to Gabriel but might be having seizures. Whose own people thought he was crazy. If you look at some of them, they said they thought he was a lunatic, a madman. No one ever said, Moshe Rabbeinu, you're crazy. No one has said to Joshua, you're crazy. No one ever said to Yirmiyah, you're crazy. They didn't like what he said, but they didn't think he was crazy. We like it the way it was. We don't need any changes. We don't need anything new. Thank you, Hashem, for the Torah you gave us 3,500 years ago. I'm so sorry that the Gentiles didn't get a national revelation. They have to wait for the Mashiach to come before they realize they inherited lies from their fathers. Zechariah 8:23. Now, what was so, I don't want to get too much politics over here, but I think there was something about that debate that we all watched, or some of us watched, that internally gave us some satisfaction. We feel bad for the guy. Listen, whether you like his policies or not, whether you think he, took money from the Chinese and Ukrainians and everybody else would pay him under the table, okay, maybe he's the one that got caught. They're all guilty of it. He's served this country for 50 years. I don't have to agree with him, but I can say, you know what? He served the country, and he's clearly got some type of cognitive deficit, the nice term, okay? Something wrong with the guy. So when I have no pleasure in watching him melt in front of 100 million people, purposely humiliate himself in front of everybody. That doesn't make me feel good. What made us feel good? What made us feel good is we all knew the truth. The truth was that this guy had issues from the beginning.
Here we saw it live.
And we were lied to. We were lied to by the media, by the cabinet, by the vice president, by Congress. We were lied to. And normal human beings, not including politicians, because they live and lie. I love it when one politician accuses another politician of liar. Let's just get this out there. If you're a politician, you're a liar. It's just that's the way it is. There's no such thing as an honest politician. And if you can find one, it's like a zebra. Hold on to it. We want to examine it. There is no, they're all liars. They stretch the truth. They aggrandize. They minimize their failures and maximize their benefits. They all do it. Trump did it. Biden does it. Biden lied twice before, and that's why he was taken out. He ran for president twice before and plagiarized speeches of other people, got caught by it when they were real journalists and had to resign, leave the primary. That's what he means when he says, I fell down and got up again. All of them was his own thing. But we all knew the truth. And there's a satisfaction. Is drinking. Truth is revealed about it. That is inherent human beings. Why? Why is you watching that? And internally, wow, that's amazing. What's that? Okay. Every observant Jew.
A lot of them voted for Biden.
They could vote for Biden, but not vote for him this time.
They might.
A lot of them voted for Biden.
Let me ask you a question. What is so amazing when we in both of those movies, one is a cartoon and one is a real movie, that is internally the most amazing feeling, and you know, is it them leaving Egypt? The splitting of the sea. That, whether it's not my granddaughter. What is so, and all the Jewish people sing when they, the first time they sing is when? Vayar Yisrael et Mitzrayim, not dead. They didn't wash up dead. They washed up dying. And the Egyptian died at the foot of a Jew. Why was that so? Why did they sing? Why did that stimulate the song? Because it was a revelation of the truth, the oneness of God. Because the truth, within the truth is contained the oneness of God. Because the Talmud teaches us, he doesn't sign it Yud Kei Vav Kei. He doesn't sign it Aleph Daled Nun Yud. He signs it Emet. That when he's going to do a stamp on something, truth, Emet. When they saw the ocean open up and we walked through, and then we saw the ocean close and the enemy destroyed by the same hand of God. That revelation of the oneness of Hashem, that truth, caused us to sing. Lost the ability to be the Mashiach. A quality of redemption is to be able to appreciate the revelation of the truth. Why is that? Because when the Mashiach comes, all the Goyim are going to recognize that they inherited lies. Not that their fathers lied to them or their grandfathers lied to them. Paul lied to them. Okay? And then the lie continued on for the next, 1,000 years. If Muhammad existed, he lied to them. And if he didn't exist, the caliphs during the Abbasid dynasty created the Quran and lied to them. However you want to deal with it, they were all lied to. And they think the arrogance that they have. You see a Christian debating a Muslim and a Muslim debating a Christian. Each one is throwing mud at each other. I watch all of them, saving me the trouble of having to do it. But it's amazing when it comes time for looking at the original pizza, that's not part of the discussion. I have never seen in a debate between a Jew, old, debate this with this, and it's like the Ramban. This debate idea that we had last Thursday is not new. In the Middle Ages, a Jew by the name of Pablo Christianity in 1263. And Pablo had this amazing idea because he thought he studied the Talmud a little bit in the Cheder over there. He thought he'd debate one of the greatest minds in the history of the Jewish people, the Ramban, on the Talmud. And his opinion was, I don't have to prove that Jesus existed in the Tanakh. I can show you in the Talmud that he exists. And the Ramban wiped the floor with him. But the Ramban didn't want to debate because, CNN back then, how you know a religion is a lie? I'll give you a very simple test. A very simple test. How many centuries teach the Bible? The Dark Ages. What are the Dark Ages? Hundreds and hundreds of years where people were walking around illiterate. Because what's the problem? If you give access to people to read the books, they learn very quickly that it's all lies. How do you protect a lie? We saw that for the past 3.5 years. The guy has a problem. You protectionally for them, he had to debate for an hour and a half. And he melted in 18 minutes. I think he melted on the way out. So when you have a lie, what do? You squash debate. If you live in a Muslim country, do you have the ability to watch all the YouTube videos that are destroying Islam at its foundations every day? I'm going to tell you the answer is no, because I'm talking with some 16-year-old, I don't even know where he lives, but he clearly lives in a Muslim country. And I sent him a video about the 60 scientific errors of the Quran. They like to claim that the Quran has science like no history. Nonsense. I sent him a video by a former Muslim who speaks fluent Arabic. Unfortunately, he let me know the video is not available in this country because the government doesn't want them to see it. Wake up! If the government is telling you you can't see something, first of all, that's the first. If government says I can't look at something, that's the quickest way I'm going to look at it. But they can't do that. What are you hiding? Now let's contrast that with Jews. Has there ever been a time in history where a Jewish boy was not able to read the Torah when they were 7 years old? Now maybe they get to 13. Really? But that's because the government didn't want, if you go back before, it was not a problem. The same thing. Communists do not want the truth. Again, capitalists don't want the truth revealed either. Okay, so let's leave that. But there's a censorship. But if you take your average Jewish community that is undisturbed, not living in a ridiculously strict Christian or Muslim country, you teach children from early age Hebrew. Why? Why don't you just teach them English? I have a Bible. I can read it in English. Why do I have to spend all this money to send my kid to yeshiva so he can learn how to read the Bible in Hebrew? Because once you're reading a translation, you're reading an interpretation. By teaching the child Hebrew, what do they learn? I'm going to look at it for myself. See, because we're not afraid of them looking, because we don't have anything to hide. There's no more literate people in the world throughout all of history when they were allowed to be literate. Even they claim that Jesus was illiterate or his followers were illiterate. In the New Testament, they have a story of Jesus. Those days, there was no Baal Koreh. You read it yourself or you didn't get out, okay? But there was no such thing as because we have nothing to hide. We have 23,500 Pisukim in the Tanakh. Read any of them. We are not afraid. If you come up with a, let's put it in context. Let's see what all the other verses say. Let's see what else is said in other places. We don't zero in, take one verse out, say, aha! That's what the Christians do. And the Muslims are worse. They just make up a brand new book and say our stories are wrong. We didn't preserve our text so well. Biggest nonsense in history. We are on the dawn of the revelation of the truth. The revelation of the Yichud of Hashem in the world. This is what's being prepared for us here. And the reason we're seeing glimpses of what it's going to be like when the Gentiles are going to come to you and they're going to say they inherited lies from their father. And when a Muslim realizes he inherited lies, he's going to go to the Imam? No, the Imam and the priest and all of their followers are going to come to us. And we are going to show them the truth. You want to prepare for the coming of the Mashiach? First, know why we're right. Don't just feel it. Know it. And then, when you know why we're right, and you have some extra time, learn why they're wrong. Because a person who knows why we're right and why they're wrong is going to be able to help them on the path to get close to Hashem more than a person who doesn't. And we are obligated to know why we're right. We may or may not be obligated to know why they're wrong. We are obligated to know why we are right. Judaism, that's Christianity and that's Islam. Because when you scratch the surface, it's all lies. Trinity, how do you answer that? Best of luck on that one. You just got to believe it's a mystery that nobody can understand. No, it just happens to be a lie. It's wrong. Judaism is a religion of belief. There are things that are beyond human comprehension, like why God created us with 2 eyes and not 3. I can't answer that question. No one can answer that question. That's getting into the will of God. That's beyond our understanding. But anything from the Bet of Breshit and on is completely understandable. And it's our obligation, to the best of our intellectual ability, to know it. Not just to believe it, but to know it. And to know it, that means looking at life experience. That's why do you stand up for a person that's 60 years old? Some say 70. Even if they're a Gentile. Why? People get older. And they begin to see things when they truly look. If they want to remain in ignoramus like Hugh Hefner and these other people, best of luck to them. But if they want to truly see, they will be able to see what's going on. They have a vision because they have a life experience. And that's worthwhile to stand up for. Don't wait till you're 70. Don't wait till you're 60. Let's start learning now why we are right. First of all, that'll make us impervious to the lies. Because if we know why we're right, no one can come to us and tell us something. No, I know I'm right. And I'll explain to you why I'm right. I don't even have to know their books to know why I'm right.
We just have to know our own.
Correct. But when you also know their books, indestructible. And at the end, okay, let's relegate it to belief. They believe they're right. The Muslims believe they're right. The Christians believe they're right. It's happening now anyway, even without that, because the internet is destroying Christianity. So anyway.